Did you know that the Northwoods Kindred isn't just a podcast? We are a living, breathing kindred with all kinds of helpful stuff all over the web. Now, we've made it super easy and convenient for you to stalk us by putting everything that we have into one easy-to-find location. In the description below, we added our link tree, and that'll take you to everything that we have all over the net. I hope that helps. Þórr viki, my friends. Welcome, everybody. Welcome back. Welcome back to the Northwoods Kindred podcast. I'm Bodvarr, the chieftain and Gothi of the Northwoods. And today we're going to do another Norse Tales edition, but I'm going to start at the beginning here. And I'm going to talk about the beginning, the actual creation myth, where the story that started it all, as it were. And I'm going to be reading from a copy of Tales of Norse Mythology by Helen A. Guerber. Now, the interesting thing about this copy is this is a newer print by Fall River Press. The original printing of this book was in 1895, and it was called Myths of Northern Lands. And it's a great copy, and it has a few more stories than this reprint. But the beauty of this reprint is it's a real nice, heavy hardcover, and it's the one that I leave out when we have kindred gatherings. So it's like, hey, if we're bloating to Njord, the way that Guerber has this lined out in the table of contents, you can essentially just slide through and find the god or the goddess, and then read a bunch of stories and stuff that contain them. Now, that doesn't mean that they're not present in other stories, but it means that there's a focus on them, the main myths that count for that particular god or goddess or deity or giant or dwarf or whatever. So it's really neat the way that it's set up, and it's a really good reference if you have kindred gatherings and everybody's not super well read. You can just throw the book out and be like, hey, everybody take a couple minutes to go read on Njord, and we're going to do a Njord book. And then it's really neat like that. But I'm going to start on this one at the very beginning. And I think this one was republished in 2018. So it's not super old, but of course the book itself is, over 100 years old, or at least for the basic knowledge in it. And now I didn't mention this on the other stories that we told, but most of these books that I'm reading from, we found them either as a original or a reprint or something, next edition. And they are listed in our Amazon store, which is down in our link tree. If you have opportunity, bounce below here in the comment section of wherever you're consuming this podcast, and there'll be a link tree link, and in that will be all of our online stuff, which I already talked about in the little commercial thing. Let me run one more quick ad on you, get that out of the way, and then we can get right into the beginning, as she calls it. You asked for it, so we did it. Northwoods Kindred now has some amazing swag that we created just for our tribesmen. We have branded specialty shirts, tote bags, coffee cups, and even our signature NWK bucket hats. No more tired old Viking designs pillaged from the net. These are high-quality products that you can only get by visiting our Teespring store. And most are available in a wide variety of sizes and color options. There's certainly something there to make every Norse heathen a happy camper. Link is in the link tree below. Did you know that Gidja Skogel and I have a small business called Survival Hardware LLC? We are dedicated to handcrafting heirloom quality goods, real handmade products like knives, jewelry, and rich leather goods. All of our products are made with love and care right here in our Idaho shop and are sure to be among your most prized articles. If you sign up for the newsletter when you get there, we'll get a 10% discount in your email off of the entire site for your first purchase. So fill up your cart, enjoy American-made products that'll last several lifetimes, and a 10% discount just for being awesome. Explore the site when you're there, because we also have some free and cheap digital downloads that are sure to enrich your pagan practices. And more are being added all the time. Our link tree is in the description below. All right, welcome back. Now we're going to read the beginning, Myths of Creation. Although the Aryan inhabitants of northern Europe are supposed by some authorities to have come originally from the plateau of Iran in the heart of Asia, the climate and scenery of the countries where they finally settled had great influence in shaping their early religious beliefs, as well as in ordering their mode of living. The grand and rugged landscapes of northern Europe, the midnight sun, the flashing rays of the aurora borealis, the ocean continually lashing itself into fury against the cliffs and icebergs of the Arctic Circle, could not but impress the people as vividly as the almost miraculous vegetation, perpetual light, and the blue seas and skies of their brief summer season. It is no great wonder, therefore, that the Icelanders, for instance, to whom we owe the most perfect record of this belief, fancied in looking about them that the world was originally created from a strange mixture of fire and ice. Northern mythology is grand and tragical. In principal theme is the perpetual struggle of the beneficent forces of nature against the injurious, and hence it is not graceful and idyllic in character like the religion of the sunny south, where the people could bask in perpetual sunshine and the fruits of the earth grew ready to their hand. It is very natural that the dangers incurred in hunting and fishing under these inclement skies, and the suffering entailed by the long cold winters when the sun never shines, made our ancestors contemplate cold and ice as malevolent spirits. And it was with equal reason that they invoked with special fervor the beneficent influences of heat and light. When questioned concerning the creation of the world, the northern skalds and poets, whose songs are preserved in the Eddas and Sagas, declared that in the beginning, when there was as yet no earth, nor sea, nor air, when darkness rested over all, there existed a powerful being called Allfather, whom they dimly conceived as uncreated as well as unseen, and that whatever he willed came to pass. In the center of space there was in the morning of time a great abyss called Gununga Gap, the cleft of clefts, the yawning gulf, whose depths no eye could fathom, as it was enveloped in perpetual twilight. North of this abode was a space or a world known as Niflheim, the home of mist and darkness, in the center of which bubbled the exhaustless spring Hvergelmir, the seething cauldron, whose waters supplied 12 great streams known as the Elvagar. As the water of these streams flowed swiftly away from its source and encountered the cold blasts from the yawning gulf, it soon hardened into huge blocks of ice, which rolled downward into the immeasurable depths of the great abyss with a continual roar like thunder. South of this dark chasm, and directly opposite Niflheim, the realm of mist, was another world called Muspelheim, the home of the elemental fire, where all was warmth and brightness, and whose frontiers were continually guarded by Surtr, the flame giant. This giant fiercely brandished his flashing sword, and continually sent forth great showers of sparks, which fell with a hissing sound upon the ice blocks in the bottom of the abyss, and partly melted them by their heat. As the steam rose in clouds, it again encountered the prevailing cold, and was changed into rime or hoarfrost, which layer by layer filled up the great central space. Thus, by the continual action of cold and heat, and also probably by will of uncreated and unseen, a gigantic creature called Ymir, or Orgelmir, seething clay, the personification of the frozen ocean, came to life amid the ice blocks in the abyss, and as he was born of rime, he was called Rimthurs, or Ice Giant. Groping about in the gloom in search of something to eat, Ymir perceived a gigantic cow called Erumla, the Nourisher, which had been created by the same agency as himself, and out of the same materials. Hastening towards her, Ymir noticed with pleasure that from her udder flowed 4 great streams of milk, which would supply ample nourishment. All his wants were thus satisfied, but the cow, looking about for her food, in turn began to lick the salt off a neighboring ice block with her rough tongue. This she continued to do until first the hair of a god appeared, and then the whole head emerged from its icy envelope, until, by and by, Buri, the producer, stepped forth entirely free. While the cow had been thus engaged, Ymir the giant had fallen asleep, and as he slept a son and a daughter were born from the perspiration under his armpit, and his feet produced the 6-headed giant Thrudgilmir, who shortly after his birth brought forth in his turn the giant Bergelmir, from whom all evil frost giants are descended. When these giants became aware of the existence of the god Buri and of his son Bor, whom he had immediately produced, they began waging war against them. For as the gods and the giants represented the opposite forces of good and evil, there was no hope of their living together in peace. The struggle continued evidently for ages, neither party gaining a decided advantage, until Bor married the giantess Besla, daughter of Bolthorn, the Thorn of Evil, who bore him 3 powerful sons, Odin, Spirit, Vili, Will, and Ve, Holy. These 3 sons immediately joined their father in his struggle against the hostile frost giants, and finally succeeded in slaying their deadliest foe, the great Ymir. As he sank down lifeless, the blood gushed from his wounds in such floods that it produced a great deluge, in which all his race perished, with the exception of Bergelmir, who escaped in a boat and went with his wife to the confines of the world. Here he took up his abode, calling the place Jotunheim, the home of the giants. And here he begat a new race of frost giants who inherited his dislikes, continued the feud, and were always ready to sally forth from their desolate country and raid the territory of the gods. The gods in northern mythology called Aesir Having thus triumphed over their foes, and being no longer engaged in perpetual warfare, now began to look about them, with intent to improve the desolate aspects of things and fashion a habitable world. After due consideration, Bor's sons rolled Ymir's great corpse into the yawning abyss, and began to create the world out of its various component parts. Out of the flesh they fashioned Midgard, Middle Garden, as the earth was called. This was a place of the exact center of the vast space, and hedged all around with Ymir's eyebrows for bulwarks and ramparts. The solid portion of Midgard was surrounded by the giant's blood, or sweat, which formed the ocean, while his bones made the hills, his flat teeth the cliffs, and his curly hair the trees and all the vegetation. Well pleased with the result of their first effort at creation, the gods now took the giant's unwieldy skull and poised it skillfully as the vaulted heavens above earth and sea. Then, scattering his brains throughout the expanse beneath, they fashioned from them the fleecy clouds. To support the heavenly vault, the gods stationed the strong dwarfs Nordri, Sudri, Ostri, and Vestri at its four corners, bidding them sustain it upon their shoulders, and from them the 4 points of the compass received their present names of north, south, east, and west. To give light to the world thus created, the gods studded the heavenly vault with sparks secured from Muspelheim, points of light which shone steadily through the gloom like brilliant stars. The most vivid of these sparks, however, were reserved for the manufacture of the sun and moon, which were placed in beautiful golden chariots. When all these preparations had been finished, and the steeds Arvakar, the early waker, and Alsvin, the rapid goer, were harnessed to the sun chariot, the gods, fearing lest the animals should suffer from their proximity to the ardent sphere, placed under their withers great skins filled with air or with some refrigerant substance. They also fashioned the shield Svalin, the cooler, and placed it in front of the car to shelter them from the sun's direct rays, which would else have burned them and the earth to a cinder. The moon car was similarly provided with a fleet steed called Alsvidr, the Allswift, but no shield was required to protect him from the mild rays of the moon. The chariots were ready, the steeds were harnessed, and impatient to begin what was to be their daily round. But who should guide them along the right road? The gods looked about them, and their attention was attracted to the 2 beautiful offspring of the giant Mundorfari. He was very proud of his children, and had them named after the newly created orbs, Mani the moon and Sol the sun. Sol the sun-maid was the spouse of Glaur, Glow, who was probably one of Surtur's sons. The names proved to be happily bestowed, as the brother and sister were given the direction of the steeds of their bright namesake. After receiving due counsel from the gods, they were transferred to the sky, and day by day they fulfilled their appointed duties and guided their steeds along the heavenly paths. The gods next summoned Nott, or Night, and daughter Norvi, one of the giants, and entrusted to her car a dark chariot drawn by a sable steed, Rimfaxi, from whose waving mane the dew and the hoarfrost dropped down upon the earth. The goddess of night had thrice been married, and by her first husband, Naglfari, she had a son named Odd. By her second, Anar, a daughter, Jord, or Earth, and by her third, the god Dellinger, or Dawn. Another son of radiant beauty was now born to her, and he was given the name of Dag, Day. As soon as the gods became aware of this beautiful being's existence, they provided a chariot for him also, drawn by the resplendent white steed Skinfaxi, or Shining Mane, from whose mane bright beams of light shine forth in every direction, illuminating all the world and bringing light and gladness to all. But as evil always treads close upon the footsteps of good, hoping to destroy it, the ancient inhabitants of the northern religion imagined that both sun and moon were incessantly pursued by the fierce wolves Skoll, repulsion, and Hati, hatred, whose sole aim was to overtake and swallow the brilliant objects before them, so that the world might again be enveloped in its primeval darkness. At times, they said, the wolves overtook and tried to swallow their prey, thus producing an eclipse of the radiant orbs. Then the terrified people raised such a deafening clamor that the wolves, frightened by the noise, hastily dropped them. Thus rescued, sun and moon resumed their course, fleeing more rapidly than before, the hungry monsters rushing along in their wake, lusting for the time when their efforts would prevail and the end of the world would come. For the northern nations believed that as their gods had sprung from an allegiance between the divine element Bor and the mortal Besla, they were finite and doomed to perish with the world that they had made. Mani was accompanied by Huki, the waxing, and Bil, the waning, 2 children whom had been snatched from the earth, where a cruel father forced them to carry water all night. Our ancestors fancied that they saw these children, the original Jack and Jill, with their pale darkly outlined upon the moon. The gods not only appointed sun, moon, day, and night to mark the procession of the year, but also called evening, midnight, morning, forenoon, noon, and afternoon to share their duties, making summer and winter the rulers of the seasons. Summer, a direct descendant of Svasud, the mild and lovely, inherited his sire's gentle disposition, and was loved by all except Winter, his deadly enemy, the son of Vindisol, himself a son of a disagreeable god Vasud, and the personification of icy wind. The cold winds continually swept down from the north, chilling all the earth, and the Northmen imagined that these were set in motion by the great giant Rosvelger, the corpse swallower, who, clad in eagle plumes, sat at the extreme northern verge of the heavens, and that when he raised his arms or wings, cold blasts darted forth and swept ruthlessly over the face of the earth, blighting all things with their icy breath. While the gods were occupied in creating the earth and providing for its illumination, a whole host of maggot-like creatures had been breeding in Ymir's flesh. Those uncouth beings now attracted divine attention. Summoning them into their presence, the gods first gave them forms and endowed them with superhuman intelligence, and then divided them into 2 large classes. Those which were dark, treacherous, and cunning by nature were banished to Svartalfheim, the home of the black dwarves situated underground. Hence, they were never allowed to come forth during the day under penalty of being turned into stone. They were called dwarfs, trolls, gnomes, or kobolds, and spent all of their time and energy in exploring the secret recesses of the earth. They collected gold, silver, and precious stones, which they stowed away in secret crevices, hence they could withdraw them at will. The remainder of these small creatures, including all that were fair, good, and useful, the gods called fairies and elves, and sent them to dwell in the airy realm of Alfheim, home of the light elves, situated beneath heaven and earth, whence they could flit downward whenever they pleased, to attend to the plants, flowers, sport with the birds and butterflies, or dance in the silvery moonlight on the green. Odin, who had been the leading spirit in all of these undertakings, now bade the gods, his descendants, follow him to the broad plain called Idavold, far above the earth, on the other side of the great stream Ifing, whose waters never froze. In the center of the sacred space, which from the beginning of the world had been reserved for their own abode, and called Asgard, home of the gods, the 12 Aesir gods and the 24 Asenir goddesses all assembled at the bidding of Odin. Then was held a great council, at which it was decreed that no blood should be shed within the limits of their realm or peace stead, but that harmony should reign there forever. As a further result of the conference, the gods set up a forge where they fashioned all their weapons and tools required to build the magnificent places of precious metal, in which they lived for many long years in a state of such perfect happiness that this period has been called the Golden Age. Although the gods had from the beginning designed Midgard, or Manheim, as the abode of man, there were at first no human beings to inhabit it. One day Odin, Vili, and Ve, according to some authorities, or Odin, Honor the Bright One, and Lother, Loki, or Fire, started out and walked along the seashore, where they found either 2 trees, the ask and the elm, or 2 blocks of wood, hewn into rude semblances of human form. The gods gazed first upon the inanimate wood in silent wonder, and then perceived the use it could be put to. Odin gave these logs souls, Honor bestowed motion and senses, and Lodr contributed blood and blooming complexions. Thus endowed with speech and thought, and with the power to love and to hope and to work, and with life and death, the newly created man and woman were left to rule Midgard at will. They gradually peopled it with their descendants, while the gods remembered that they had called them into life, took special interest in all that they did, watched over them, and vouchsafed their aid and protection. Allfather next created a huge ash called Yggdrasil, the tree of the universe, of time or of life, which filled all the worlds, taking root not only in the remotest depths of Niflheim, where bubbled the spring beginning Vergomir, but also in Midgard, near Mimir's well, the ocean, and in Asgard, near Urdr fountain. From its 3 great roots the tree attained such a marvelous height that its topmost bough, called Lerad, the peace giver, overshadowed Odin's hall, while the other wide-spreading branches towered over the other worlds. An eagle was perched in the bough Lerad, and between his eyes sat the falcon Vedfolnir, sending his piercing glances down into heaven and earth and Niflheim, and reporting all that he saw. As the tree Yggdrasil was ever green, its leaves never withering, it served as pasture ground not only for Odin's goat, Hidrun, which supplied the heavenly mead, the drink of the gods, but also for the stags, Dane and Dvalin, Dunri and Dunrathur, from whose horns honeydew dripped down upon the earth and furnished the water for all the rivers in the world. In the seething cauldron Vergelmir, close by the great tree, a horrible dragon called Nidhugg continually gnawed the roots, and was helped in his work of destruction by countless worms, whose aim it was to kill the tree, knowing that its death would be the signal for the downfall of the gods. Scampering continually up and down the branches and the trunk of the tree, the squirrel Ratatosk, or branch borer, the typical busybody and tale-bearer, passed its time repeating to the dragon below the remarks of the eagle above, and vice versa, in hope of stirring up some strife between them. It was, of course, essential that the tree Yggdrasil should be maintained in a perfectly healthy condition, and this duly was performed by the Norns, or Fates, who daily sprinkled it with the holy waters from the Erdar fountain. This water, as it trickled down to earth through branches and leaves, supplied the bees with honey. From either edge of Niflheim, arcing high above Midgard, rose the sacred bridge Bifrost, Asubru the rainbow, built of fire, water, and air, whose quivering and changing hues it retained, and over which the gods traveled to and fro to the earth or to Erdar well, at the foot of the ash Yggdrasil, where they daily assembled in council. Of all the gods, Þórr only, the god of thunder, never passed over the bridge, for fear lest his heavy tread or the heat of his lightning would destroy it. The god Heimdall kept watch and ward there day and night. He was armed with a trenchant sword and carried a trumpet called Gjallarhorn, upon which he generally blew a soft note to announce the incoming or going of the gods, but upon which a terrible blast would be sounded when Ragnarok should come and the frost giants and Surtr combined to destroy the world. Now, although the original inhabitants of heaven were the Aesir, they were not the sole divinities of the northern races, who also recognized the power of the sea and the wind gods, the Vanas dwelling in Vanaheim and ruling their realm as they pleased. In early times, before the golden palaces in Asgard were built, a dispute arose between the Aesir and the Vanas, and they resorted to arms, using rocks, mountains, and icebergs as missiles in the fray, but discovering ere long that in unity alone lay strength. They composed their differences and made peace, and to ratify the treaty they exchanged hostages. It was thus that the Van Njord came to dwell in Asgard with his two children Frey and Freya, while the Asa, Honir, Odin's own brother, took up his abode in Vanaheim. And thus concludes the beginning. Did you know that Northwoods Kindred has a Discord channel dedicated to frith and sharing of knowledge related to the Norse pagan path? We have channels dedicated to all disciplines on this path and some of the most kind and generous heathens the world over. Are you curious how to pronounce something in Icelandic or Norse? Jump on over to the mother tongue and ask a native speaker. Still not getting it? Up into the Well of Words with voice and video channel to speak face to face. Trying to work out the meaning of a difficult dream? Hop over to Dreams and Visions and get somebody else's opinion. Are you proud of something that you accomplished? Share it with the whole tribe on Braggy's Round. Experience community like only the Northwoods Kindred can bring. And of course, it is free and always will be. The link is in the link tree. Welcome to the Northwoods Kindred's online tribe. I hope you enjoyed that. It's a really great story. I really love the way that Helen Guerber tells the story because you can feel the actual original poems in the way she tells the story. She doesn't change it so much that the poems lose their context. So if you were to read her story form and then go back and read a fairly simple translation of Saemnder's Edda, then you'll find that they click together well. Like, she tells the story, and of course you have to embellish in order to take a poem and make it into a full story. But she does a really good job of kind of maintaining the original feel of all those stories. So I appreciate it. I hope you do too. Remember, there are links to all of these books that I use for this story time. They're listed in our Amazon store link down in the in the link tree below. So follow that, and if you pick up something from the store, we get a little kickback, and we super appreciate that. It doesn't cost you anything extra, but it sure does help us out on this end. So we appreciate you being here. Thank you for listening. I love you for being here, and I'd ask you to share this on any platform that you happen to be consuming it on. Share it with people who you think might enjoy it, and let's get the word out. Let's get some people talking about these stories instead of sowing division amongst our fellow Norse pagans. Let's sow a little bit of unity, just as the Aesir and the Vanir did when they concluded their war and created a better place for all, just before that epic golden age. Let's enter into a new golden age. And when we do that, I want to remind you to kick off your shoes, walk barefoot on the soil, get grounded, get connected, and have a wonderful life. Þórr viki.